Well, I am worried, Kevin. I think that it's very informative that Patrick Vallance has also come out very clearly in support and defence of net zero. And he's making, we know that there's a similar argument that's being made by many who like to slur and smear and say you can't ask questions or you can't, apply the scientific method to a discussion of net zero or anything in science without being called a denier somehow, as though these are immutable truths. And more than that, anything that is about to be done should not be challenged, because obviously there's the question of what's actually happening and there's what you do about it. In the same way, when we were looking back at COVID and then discussions were made about policy and they said, well, this is the science and these are the scientists, as though somehow there ever was one science and there wasn't a scientific method, which is about interrogating ideas and principles and questioning it. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Keir Starmer said it's going to be about change. And yet what we've seen immediately is doubling down and a consolidation of some of the same. We've seen we've seen Sir Patrick Vallance here being appointed as Science Minister of the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, having come firmly behind Keir Starmer, and as you say, are wanting sooner, longer, harder, continuous lockdowns that have been so damaging to the economy, to families, to business, to the NHS, across the board, that we're still going to take a long time to recover from. And then again, the measures that are being proposed, and we've been told change, but actually what we're seeing is it looks like David Lammy across over trying to kind of parallel our rules along with the EU on, believe it or not, yes, net zero, and on migration, and on energy, and on the pandemic response, right? So change, but going back to something that there was a massive democratic mandate to challenge, although not trying to do it in the way formally that could be challenged legally. I think the thing is, what we're seeing is the ascendancy of the technocrats and those that want to say we know best, and then bringing in people that have showed that they're loyal and supportive and think that the way to handle things is to have suffocation, imposition, and not to talk about things too much. Remember, the whole idea about free speech and censorship, we can see that now some of the people in power have a very fraught relationship with that. Well, I think Keir Starmer was a big champion and fan of lockdowns. He actually wanted them to go on for longer and harder, tub thumping, threatening, also saying with other things like with the jabs and mandates that they'll impose legislation, quickly change laws. We've seen also the man of alleged change be very cozy with the old archetype of invasions, Tony Blair, the Tony Blair Institute, saying, well, if you want to deal with immigration, it's not about getting control of the Home Office. It's not about borders and having a rigorous strategy. No, it's about digital ID. Everything gets back to digital ID with Tony Blair, and we can see Keir Starmer is a big fan of his. I think the thing is, we've got a situation where bureaucrats that would prefer a globalist organisation like the EU and like to do things to us and tell us and show how we should behave and put limits and restrictions on us, as we know from Angela Rayner as well. We can expect low emission zones and LTNs in every part of the country. We're now going to see a push and a drive to limit and restrict, and they're going to use things like net zero in particular, which Sir Patrick Vallance has said that he's a big fan of, to try and do that. And it's going to be incumbent on all of us, all of your viewers and those that together, to challenge that. And we'd love people to get involved. It's going to be a big battle in the future. The less we have democratic accountability and people that are voted for, the more of an issue it is. We saw that there was a select committee in 2020 that came forward across party, and that was one of the key things that it was advocating. And the danger, of course, is that you don't get people held to proper scrutiny. We know that when Parliament was prorogued and closed down, that was a real attack on our democracy. But the thing about being able to vote for people and to get them out and to challenge them is that is the litmus test. And the more you bring in people that are not elected, like we've got the unelected chamber, we've got the House of Lords, and the more you bring in people that are unelected, the less democratic impetus there is. And people that are bureaucratic and technocrats, there's nothing they like more than circumventing the democratic process. So it is a problem, and we should insist that, people are democratically elected and the representatives are in that context.